Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to give everyone just a little second here to get signed in and get situated, and we'll be starting in just about 20 seconds here. All right, looks like everybody's pretty much signed in and settled in, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here. Today we are excited to be presenting to you on how trees are an appreciating asset and how housing associations can benefit from a proactive management strategy. And I'm excited today to be moderating today's discussion. My name is Josh Bohanek with the Davie Resource Group. And with us today, we have Kenton Rogers with Treeconomics and Rob Schofield from Live West.
Hello.
Before we jump into today's discussion, I thought I'd just go over a couple housekeeping items. Just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, so we can view it later and you can share it with colleagues that maybe couldn't make it today. We are going to be using some interactive polling, which will allow us to better understand who is out there and what the goals for your session are today. We will be answering questions both throughout and do a live question at the end. So you can use the chat panel in the GoToWebinar toolbox there to do that. So if you want to go ahead and practice, we'd love knowing where you're calling in from and where you're viewing this from today. So go ahead and type in there and tell us where you're calling in from. And again, we'll try to answer some of those questions as we go. And at the end, we'll turn our webcams back on and I'll moderate a live question and answers. We do have a handout uploaded for you that we think will be useful for you and we'll be referencing later in the presentation, so you can download that whenever you want. If you have a problem downloading it, just let us know and we can email it to you as well. And at the end of today's presentation, you will be receiving a follow-up email, which has a very short survey. We'd love to get your feedback on how we did today and anything else you'd like to share, as well as a link to this recording. So again, that you can view it later or share with colleagues that maybe couldn't make it today. All right, so now let's go ahead and get on with today's discussion. Again, I'm excited to be welcoming Kenton and Rob here. So Kenton, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away. I can see your screen. It looks great.
Great. Okay, thanks, Josh. Good introduction there. And so, hang on a moment. Straight away, here we go. Right. So, yeah, we're going to be chatting with Rob just a bit later. But just before that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves and also do a bit of scene setting, really. So we're Treeconomics, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Treeconomics, which is a employee-owned social enterprise, and we work across the UK and beyond. And we work with urban tree managers, urban planners, developers, community groups, researchers, and that's to help us deliver our mission of sustainable treescapes for everyone. And we do that by working collaboratively with people like Rob at Live West, but also a wide range of other collaborators. And we provide urban forest assessment tools and techniques, methods and solutions. But today what we really wanted to focus on was some of the great work that Rob's been doing with his housing association, Live West. You know, there's an estimated 2.4 million homes provided by housing associations in the UK, and it's estimated they will be looking after around 2 million trees. So it's not an insignificant number. But before we launch into that, I just wanted to set a bit of the scene really and think about where we came from as society and civilization, because humans have been around for about 6 million years, and modern man, as a recognizable upright Homo sapiens, has been around for around 200,000 years, with civilization starting around 10,000 to 6,000 years ago. And then, of course, we had the modern industrial revolution, which only started in the 1800s. So the point to try and get across is actually that we are much better adapted to living in places like this, on the prairie or on the savannah or in the forests and woodlands, than we are at living in our towns and our cities. And the environment of our towns and cities, generally speaking, is one that hasn't really been built with much thought to this ancestry, or the fact that we're much better adapted to living outside of the towns and cities. And as a consequence, then they're not very well developed for our health and well-being, and quite frankly, they're stressful places to live. And this is the challenge we face, I think, going forward. Already 54% of the global population live in urban areas, and that's projected to rise to 70% by 2050. And in fact, in the UK already, it's around 80% of us live in urban centres. And that 70% figure in 2050, 2/3 of that urban fabric which we're going to live in hasn't even been built yet. So it's a big thing to consider, that trees really do help us to build better places to live, because they're normally such a stressful place to live. But unfortunately, urban forests are quite often an overlooked and undervalued resource, and as a consequence, we're losing them at quite an alarming rate. So it's been estimated that 36 million urban trees are lost every single year in the US alone. And just to put that into context, there's only 8 million trees in the whole of Greater London's urban forest. And in fact, 67% of urban forests in the UK have no proactive management whatsoever. And that's a big shame, because trees really do help create better places to live. They're vital in doing that. And they provide over 20 distinct ecosystem services or benefits. They clean our air, they hold stormwater in their canopies, they provide thermal comfort, they can even reduce energy consumption in buildings, so they can reduce heating bills and they can reduce air conditioning costs. They provide a cultural link to the past, they store carbon, and they provide habitat as well. But unless we start to value these things in a meaningful way, and yes, mainly that does mean to monetize the services that the trees are providing, we're not really going to be able to fully demonstrate the cost benefit of planting trees properly so that they grow and thrive in our urban environments. So unless we get this bit right, our natural asset valuation, then we're never going to be able to move away from scenes like this, maybe, which some of you may be familiar with. It's quite a stark, harsh landscape, to places like this where the trees have really been thought about, and the way people move and integrate and how society functions has really been considered. But of course, that takes time and money. But also more modern buildings like this example of the Bosco Verticale in Italy, designed by Borelli Studios, where the whole concept of an urban forest has been applied to 3 tenement blocks in Milan. And this is actually a proper functioning ecosystem as well. It's not just a gimmick, it's carbon neutral, and it provides benefits which have been measured and will be maintained over the lifespan of the building as well. So I've mentioned the urban forest a couple of times, and to some of you that may be a new term, and to some of you it may seem a bit oxymoronic. How can an area be both urban and forest? Well, if you look at a lot of our towns and cities, in fact, they probably can be classified as forest by definition, and we're not looking so much at the trees in the town, we're looking more at the town within the trees. And the definition of the urban forest, there are a few out there, but generally we're not just talking about the trees, although they're normally the largest single component of green infrastructure, but it's also the shrubs and the hedges, the plants, the moss, the lichens, all the animals and plants associated with them as well. So you can check those definitions in the literature, but I think one of the key things most of them miss is actually the community that lives in the urban forest. And of course, they're probably the largest component. And so with all that in mind, I would like to now introduce Rob Schofield, who's the Estate Services Technical Manager at Live West. And I'd like to ask you first, Rob, maybe if you could just introduce yourself and introduce Live West, please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. So yes, I'm Rob, and I've worked at Live West in a number of guises for over 20 years now in various roles. Prior to that, I've got a background in practical tree work and conservation, which is what I trained in. So currently I sit in the estate services team at Live West, and I'm responsible for the management of all of our trees, as well as providing sort of general technical advice to the team. I also look after all the digital mapping, handing over our new developments into service contracts, and I try and get involved in community and environmental projects where I can. So that's my role. And Live West is a large not-for-profit provider of housing in the southwest of England. We've got an emphasis on affordable homes. We build and manage a lot of affordable homes, but we also build a whole range of homes across a variety of tenures. So we build shared ownership properties, properties which will be rented at market rates, and properties which we sell on the open market, which generates funding to build more affordable homes. So we've got quite a big development program. Live West itself was created from the merger of several other smaller housing associations. So we now cover a very large area across 20 local authority districts in the southwest. So all the way from the Isles of Scilly up to Gloucester, 37,000 properties we've got in management at the moment. And we're looking to build 1,500 new homes every year for the next 10 years. Obviously this year the program's taken a bit of a hit, but we're on track to ramp that back up and get those new properties, which are desperately needed down in this part of the world, into the ground. And those development sites can range from, sometimes it might just be half a dozen properties as part of a larger site being built by a developer, but we also do complete builds of our own sites, which might be upwards of 60, 100 more properties. And we're looking to ramp that scale up to hit the target of 1,500 a year. So Live West has sort of, almost by accident, I suppose, become a major owner of land as well as houses, because there's a lot of land associated with all of these properties. So we're probably one of the largest landowners in the southwest now, I would say. And because of that, we own a lot of open space, and we've come to own a large number of trees. So the sort of latest count, I think we're up to about 28,000 trees across this area of 23, I think now, local authorities. Everything from tall bay palms to veterinary oak trees. And these are on communal spaces around the estates, but also trees within the residents' gardens. So my team is responsible for the cyclical surveying of all of these trees, and then managing all of the necessary works that arise from those surveys and any inquiries that come in.
Thanks, Rob. And so we've got a poll question now for all you folks out there, which is, what kind of organisation do you work for? So if you could click away, and we can see the results coming in. So we've got about a third local authority, a third private consultants, and around 20% housing associations. and 10% NGOs. And about a quarter are other. So there's quite a few housing associations there. That's encouraging, and local authorities as well. So I was going to ask you, Rob, actually, what led you to decide to get your first tree inventory at Live West, and was there one when you started?
No, there wasn't. So when I first got involved with the tree management, it was with one of the predecessor organisations. So we only had 3,500 properties to manage then, but that seemed like quite a handful at the time. And the conversation in the early 2000s was all about risk management from trees. There have been a couple of high-profile accidents involving tree failure, and the onus in the industry and generally was very much about managing the risk posed by the trees on the land. So that was the impetus for us to start looking at doing a tree survey and getting an inventory together, which looked at all of those trees, assessed the risk, and had them all plotted on a GIS map system. So risk was the primary factor, but then also because of the size of the patch, which again we thought was big at the time, but on that map that's showing on the next slide is actually only a fairly small part of the southeastern corner now. It was much more efficient to have the information on the trees on a desktop rather than having to react to every inquiry that came in by driving across the patch to go and have a look at it. So we wanted to make the way that we dealt with inquiries more efficient. So having all that data to hand was really important with that. The final thing was that we wanted to move from reactive management to cyclical management. So by having a cyclical management program in place, we should and did reduce the amount of inquiries and complaints that were coming in about trees. And also we wanted to avoid any damage to the properties themselves, because at that point the properties, the houses, were the only asset in town. They were the only thing that was seen as, you know, the value. That was the valuable asset that we needed to manage, and if trees were getting in the way of that, you know, we obviously needed to deal with that. So as the company's grown, we've expanded the inventory out. This screenshot was taken when we were covering Devon and Cornwall. But our patch now extends probably equally to the east, up, as I say, up past Gloucester. So we've expanded that system out with each sort of increment of the company as it's grown.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a large undertaking to do all that. How long did it take, and what did it involve?
Well, I suppose because we've done it in increments, we started off in the South Hams, then expanded to Devon, then to Cornwall, and now we've done the latest tranche of 10,000 homes up to Gloucester within the last 12 months. So we've used the same system, the same software. Initially, that was carried out in-house by myself, but obviously as the company's grown, it was too much for me to do that. So we ended up outsourcing a lot of that survey work for a period. But we've just insourced that again. We've taken on a member of staff full-time who will be carrying out the surveys for us, and also helping us to, you know, the benefit of that is that we've got someone there to help us with the general urban forest management when they're not out surveying. So we've grown to such a size now that we can justify having a member of staff in-house to do that.
That's fantastic. And I guess, you know, it goes back to that adage, unless you know what you've got, you can't really begin to start managing what you have.
No, absolutely not. And, you know, I've sort of lost count of the number of times that I've been told, oh, don't worry, we don't have many trees in this new section of the company that's being bolted in. And the reason that people have said that is because they've never gone to look. So every time it happens, you know, we take in another great tranche of trees to manage.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, we're going to have another question now thrown out on the poll. So we'd like to know if your organisation has a tree inventory. So yes, no, but you wish you did, you're not sure, or what is a tree inventory? Oh, and that's really good. So there's no one out there is not sure, and everyone knows what a tree inventory is, so that's a good start. Around 70% have got that tree inventory in place. So that's
very, very encouraging.
Yeah, and it very similar to that statistic in the earlier slide, which is actually from a survey called Trees in Towns Too, saying that, you know, I think it was 67% of local authorities have no proactive tree management plan or urban forestry program in place. So yeah, some good results actually. So yeah, just going back then to what the project involved. I mean, how much did it cost, or is it an ongoing cost?
In order to get this project started, I think the cost was less than £5,000 in order to carry out the valuation project. We'd first looked at doing an iTree project when after the first project was carried out in Torbay, but at that point it involved quite a lot of field work, and when we looked into it, it was going to be quite difficult to do that field work with sending people out to take samples of the trees and get the data, and we just didn't have the resource for it, and also because of our scattered land holding, it would have been quite difficult to carry that out. But I'd remained in touch with Kenton at Treeconomics, and reading in the journal that there was a new system called iTree Eco, which could use the data from the existing tree inventory, which didn't involve any field work. And that, for us, you know, we're very busy all of the time. So to be able to do a project like this without having to go out and gather extra data, it was all data that we had in the systems already. So in order to do the project, we just exported all the necessary data into the right format and then sent it across to Treeconomics. There was a slight complication because we had just merged with another company and we had two different data sets, but we managed to come up with some workarounds with that, and working with Kenton, we made some assumptions, agreed assumptions where we needed to merge the data together. So once we'd got the data out and passed it across, yeah, it was then over to you to crunch the numbers.
Yeah,
and
I think it was in 2015 when that change came in, allowing iTree to run an existing tree inventory, and that was a real game changer really for a lot of organizations, so that they can run existing tree inventories through the program without doing all the field work, which is great news if you've already got a tree inventory.
Yeah, well, that made it an achievable thing for us to do, because we just couldn't have done it otherwise. But actually, when we did this, it was really simple. And then the output of that is a standard report that came back, and then I adapted that report so that it became Live West specific, if you like. So I put in some more facts and figures about Live West, adapted it for our audience, if you like, as well. And then I cross-referenced some of the data that was in the report so that it referenced other data from our company. So one of the numbers that I was keen to look at was how the carbon sequestration of all of our trees could be balanced against the carbon emissions of our repairs fleet. We've got 350 repairs vehicles that operate across the area. So I was really interested to see how much of that carbon would be absorbed by the trees as a sort of cross balance. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to moderate the whole fleet. It was only about a third of those vehicles. So, but that's still a significant amount, I suppose. So that was one of the interesting points that came out.
Yeah, third's pretty good. I know when we did Torbay, the biggest issue with carbon is the amount that's emitted in the first place, and trees absorb that carbon, but the big problem is that we're consuming too much energy as well. So yeah, leading into question 3, then what, that valuation, what are there any other examples of why that was important to you to highlight that value?
Yeah, well, the reason that I became sort of interested in this when I first read about the iTree project that was carried out in Torbay, the first UK project, was that it completely flipped the view of trees on its head from where I was used to looking at it. So, as I said previously, we were very much driven by risk management, and the trees were seen very much, certainly if not by me, by most of my colleagues, as a liability. So to read that report and see how it was measuring the asset value of trees and seeing them as an asset rather than as a liability just completely turned that on its head for me, which is why I was really keen to try and get involved with this and try and get a valuation of our project. And as I say, all of our trees are really widely scattered, so it was interesting to see, if we aggregate the value of all those individual sites together, what the value would be. A large part of what we do in the day-to-day management is dealing with requests from people to either prune trees or remove them altogether, because they're often viewed as a liability or a nuisance. So I thought that by having an objective measurement of the value of the trees, it would give us a much more robust argument when we were trying to argue against removal. That we can demonstrate that there is a quantifiable value to the tree stock, and that by incrementally removing it over time, we're going to degrade the value of that asset. And also, it sort of helps to justify the annual spend on tree work. We've got significant budgets for tree work. So having facts and figures to back up, we're investing X amount of money into the budget, but the whole value of the asset is massively in excess of the annual spend on maintenance. That's a good thing to have behind you when you're arguing for resource, basically. And as I said, we've been successful in retaining our budgets and taking on a new member of staff to sort of help contribute to the management.
And I guess
also with the current situation with ash dieback, it's allowed us to demonstrate not only how much money we're going to need to set aside to deal with that, but what the loss to the value of the asset will be over that same period.
Yeah, and that's something Torbay and the pilot project found really useful as well, was having those figures quite readily accessible as well. To hand, because these questions normally need answering quite quickly.
Yes, that's right. So if you've got that project, I hate to use the phrase, but oven ready, to be sort of brought out, you've got that evidence there. You're not having to go trying to find evidence. It's something solid that you can use when you're making those arguments. And the same, I suppose, for we're trying to make the argument for doing more tree planting. And again, it's great if you can show what the benefits of that planting will be. Maybe not per individual tree, but as a whole, we're looking to increase the benefits that the urban forest is providing.
So was there any other, as the project progressed, other elements that were involved in it? So you've mentioned the geographical information systems, and because I know that you have your tree inventory, which isn't always on a geographical information system, but I think yours is, isn't it?
Well, when we did this, it was a sort of 50-50 or a 70-30. I think 70% of the trees were plotted, and the rest of the trees were held in a sort of spreadsheet cross-reference with maps system. So that was why we had to do this, making some assumptions on some of that data in order to get it so that it was manageable. But actually now, because we've incorporated that extra area into our normal cycle of works, we've got all of that information into the GIS system now anyway. So if we wanted to do this again, then we would have all the data in one place. But yeah, obviously, if if there are other ways the data's held, you know, as long as you've got the fields which are needed for the sort of input figures for the iTree, then I'm sure that they can be properly managed, can't they?
Yeah, and as a bare minimum, you need the species and the diameter at breast height, the DBH, which most people have. But it sounds like, you know, you've got a good system now where you've got a log of the trees on the tree inventory. You've got the iTree data. You've got it on a geographical information system, and also you're able to generate your works orders as well, and manage workload with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I was just going to mention was that as well as the iTree survey, we had an additional, it's called a CAVAT survey, which is capital asset value of amenity trees, which is a slightly different valuation to the iTree. But that was whilst we were managing that data set, it was a really simple thing to do that extra amenity valuation at the same time.
Yeah, and that returns some quite high values actually for the value of the tree as a visual amenity, as long as it's visible by the public.
Yes.
But as a matter of fact, even though the values seem quite high, I think when they're taken into context of the buildings that are around them and the values of those, then actually it's probably still quite a conservative estimate.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing for us is obviously by the nature of what we do, all of our trees are within, you know, the immediate public realm of where people live. So, you know, it's not surprising that the scores came out really high for that.
Yeah. And yeah, how long? I guess it's an ongoing project. This now you've got your tree inventory up and running. There's a constant updating that's done with it.
Yeah, yeah, there is. So we, as I say, we've got a big development program, and there's, you know, quite a lot of tree planting on those sites. So we have to map all of the new trees as they come in, you know, and yeah, whether we do any more mergers in the near future, I'm not sure. They're already on the horizon at the moment for a while. But yeah, as new sites come in, then they will get added into the database, so that it should be, you know, kept fairly up to date, so that we've got a fairly constant record of where we are, and any trees that get removed obviously get taken out of that.
And was it painful to do to get this up and running and to keep it updated, or do you find otherwise?
No, I mean it's not without its challenges sometimes, but I think now that we've sort of re-insourced it, I think things are going to be much easier. So yeah, keeping the inventory up to date, I think that's just part of the sort of ongoing cycle of urban forestry management that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and I guess in the southwest, the winter storms, you know, have an effect on the tree numbers.
Yes, yeah, well, that's right. You know, we are always going to be losing trees to storm damage, or, you know, because they've outgrown their location. As I say, most of our trees are fairly close to properties. You know, that slide is quite a good example there. So there will always be, you know, proactive management and removal and replacement, but it's making sure that the replacement gets done. That's the key thing, because otherwise, over time, we're going to lose that. We're going to lose that level of benefit.
Yeah, yeah. So so I suppose there's a bit of a, you know, golden question: is how much are Live West trees actually worth, Rob?
Well, the survey came back with some really interesting numbers. So the total replacement cost was over £15 million for the 26,633 trees that we processed in the report, which, you know, is a significant number. 150 species, which I would never have guessed we had that sort of widespread before we started doing this project. And you can see there in the chart some of the other values that came out of it. And I think pollution removal is a really important one. You know, where got properties now in a lot of the big cities in the southwest: Plymouth, Exeter, Bristol, Bath, So to see the the volume of pollution removal and the value of that was really interesting. Carbon, as I say, 109 tons of carbon a year, roughly over 100 diesel vans. So that was a really interesting figure as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd actually forgotten about when we did this was how easy it is to take the data out of iTree and run it on other models as well. So, and we looked at the amounts and values for the grass and the soils as well underneath the tree canopies.
Yeah, and those figures, especially the carbon storage of the soil, was significant, because as well as the trees, another sort of component of our urban forest is all the open spaces and areas of amenity grass that we own, which again, from this side of things often get overlooked, but there's clearly a significant benefit in some of those soil volumes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good to have facts and figures at your fingertips. And when you went out with these figures to begin with, what was because I quite often get the reaction that sort of people take a step back and they immediately think that it's too high a figure, but actually it's probably conservative, because we're only measuring 3 of those 20 or so benefits that apply to urban tree. I'm just wondering.
I think that's a really important thing to stress, that this is only measuring a percentage of the total benefits that trees provide. So if you could value all of those other benefits, the numbers would be even higher, wouldn't they? So yeah, I think the initial valuation, when you start talking about tree valuation, you can get some puzzled looks, because people often think in terms of firewood or timber.
Yeah.
Not the wider environmental benefits necessarily. But my director at the time I ran this project was an asset manager. He was an asset management director. And as soon as I mentioned depreciated replacement cost, which is what's used to calculate the replacement cost, he got it straight away, because that's a system which is used widely in asset management. He said, "Oh yeah, we use that for gas boilers or whatever it might be." So he immediately understood the concept. Once I'd explained to him how the value is worked out per tree, the concept of the replacement cost was something that he got into immediately. So he was really on board of it and really excited, and sort of helped me promote that. And also, because I'd sort of read up on the method and had sort of satisfied myself, if you like, that I understood how it was all arrived at, I could explain to people how these numbers had been arrived at, what the methodology was to calculate this, and how you could go from a tree to the value of the carbon storage and the tradable value of carbon, etc. So I think being able to explain rather than just throw the numbers out, and obviously in the report it explains the methodology and how the numbers have been arrived at. I think that's really important, so that people can understand it and understand the results.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like about iTree is that it's used all over the world now. So it's used in, obviously it came out of America, and it was funded by the USDA Forest Service, and Davy Tree and Casey Trees and Arbor Day have all put into it and to make it work, along with others. But it's the fact that you're using a system and you can have conversations with people at conferences or other urban forest managers, and you're using the sort of same lexicon of language and talking about the same benefits. Even though we value them slightly differently in the UK, but it can all be incorporated in the model. And I think it's really helpful, really, to elevate the position of trees and starting to look at them as assets rather than liabilities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right. And that was something I was going to say, actually, is that because there's been input from the Forestry Commission in the UK, and the Forestry Commission is the tree organisation in the public consciousness. They've got high stock with the British public. So, if you say this has been, partly developed by the Forestry Commission, people, it's almost like a seal of approval on it, that people, take it in trust that it's legitimate.
Yeah, and it's ongoing as well. So, it gets updated, new research goes into it, new models are added, And yeah, we'll put a link up actually for those that might not have heard of iTree before now. We can put a link up to the iTree Tools website where you can see the iTree Eco tool that we've been talking about today. So I've got another poll question now for everyone out there. Do you have a specialist person or team to manage your trees in your organisation? So it'd be great if you could let us know. I don't know. Can you see these figures as well, Rob? Or
I can just see the poll panel at the moment.
yeah. So we've got around 71% have someone that is looking after their trees, managing their trees, but around 26% don't have that.
Okay.
It's a bit higher than I expected, maybe. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, that is, you know, again, that's really positive, because I know that there was some research done probably 10 years ago now by somebody looking at specifically at housing associations, and they were looking at within housing associations, how many of those organisations had somebody with an arboricultural background looking after the trees, and it was really low. So often, I think in housing, the tree management gets lumped in with other servicing or asset management functions. So at that point, it was really low. So yeah, that's a good figure. I think 70% plus.
Encouraging, yeah. So we're going to ask now about the project, and you know, it's been 2 years on. How has it helped you raise the profile of Live West Trees, and what differences has it made?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely raised the profile of what we do in the sort of tree management team, because the numbers are really headline grabbing, you know, and as you say, people might sort of stop and do a double take when you throw the numbers at them, but it promotes a discussion, and it promotes people to think about it. I think, you know, often they just, well, wouldn't have considered the value of the trees. Although, you know, obviously the residents do value the trees. We get a lot of, you know, correspondence from people when we're having to take trees down. So, but having those numbers in that, you know, I'd say very quantifiable framework has given us some really good publicity material, both internally and also externally as well. And Live West have sort of recently, we've been doing a lot of work on our sort of environmental strategy. There's been a environment group formed, and they've been looking at our sort of wider environmental strategy and impact. So I submitted that iTree report to them when they were scoping that project, and they were really interested in that and seeing, you know, what we were doing around urban forestry. You know, in addition to the other sort of wider green space management that we've been carrying out. So as I said before, it's just great to have that report there to deliver when, you know, when people are asking for that sort of information.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask, you know, the report's really useful internally, and have you found it's been useful when speaking to or telling like the communities that use your housing about tree works that might be going on in and around their area?
Yes, we have, and we've used particularly the CAVAT numbers, because you can sort of trace those back to individual trees quite easily. Using those numbers to defend trees against what we consider to be unnecessary works or requests for removal. And again, that's stimulated some conversations, not always necessarily civil conversations, but when we, you know, we saying to people that we've estimated the value of that tree is, you know, £30,000 to £40,000. We're not going to remove it on a whim, you know, and it gives us another backstop to go back to when we're trying to defend those requests. So yeah, that has been really useful. And similarly, we've also considered using those numbers. We haven't pursued it, but where there's been damage or vandalism to trees, you know, so that this tree is worth a significant amount of money, there needs to be some you know, compensation there.
Yeah.
But similarly, where we've had some development sites where trees would need to be removed to facilitate the development. But it's a conversation that we can have internally. So, well, you know, we're looking to remove these 3 really significant street trees. So what are we going to get back in terms of money for replanting? Perhaps not on that site, but on some of our other land. You know, if the trees are worth £40,000, you know, just handing us a few small saplings to plant isn't really going to be a like-for-like replacement there. We need significant investment in tree planting in the area. So that's been a really useful thing to have.
Yeah, and I think that shouldn't be underestimated, really, what you've been able to do there in turning that data, not just, you know, where we turn it into information that's in the report, but actually then using it and making it using it to create action on the ground and educate and change the way things are done, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is having that sort of raised perception, but then being able to drill down into the detail. Because if you know, if you just do a report and it's great, it's really interesting, but you know, it doesn't want to just languish on the shelf. You want to be using that information to, you know, to leverage an increase in those benefits at the end of the day. That's what we're trying to work towards.
Yeah, and I think if I could just mention with iTree, you know, the data's all there in the program to be sort of looked at and inquired as and when. There was a time it was more report based, but this is you know, it's a free to use tool as well. It's open source, so anyone can get hold of it, and it's really easy to interrogate, and once you've got the data in there to use it for these types of things. So I don't know how useful you found it, Rob, and what future plans do you have with this sort of data, but also in general as well?
Yeah, well, as I say, we've been working with the environment group, and they're very keen to have a sort of dashboard of, you know, not just on trees, but on a number of different indicators, you know, whether we're improving or going backwards in our environmental strategy. So we're looking at doing exactly that, going back to the tree data. As I say, now we've got all the data in one place in our system, running that data through iTree again and seeing, since we did the initial survey 2 years ago, you know, have we moved forward or have we gone backwards? I think we'll have moved forward, because I think we'll have discovered, when we've done the survey, we've got more trees than we had, than we were aware of last time. So I think incrementally we should be increasing. But if I find that we've got 5,000 more trees, but the benefits are the same, then I'll be asking why that is. You know, have we been losing too many trees? And over time, that will be a really good indicator of whether we're achieving our, you know, corporate goals of delivering greener futures together. You know, because if we can't demonstrate that we're doing that, you know, we need to have a good look at ourselves and decide that we probably want to invest some more money into that part of the project. And also, I'm starting to look at the canopy cover assessment. I don't know whether you want to say anything about that, which again, using the GIS tools, is quite a good snapshot of how much your urban space is covered with trees at any moment in time, and doing that again every year or 2 years to make sure that that metric is not decreasing as well.
That's fantastic. It's I guess it's a you know, starting out on something like this and getting the data and the report. I think, as we found, you know, when we started working with you, that report isn't the end product. That it's just the beginning of a continuum of urban forest management and finding out more and helping you to do a better job, really, using these tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I say, you know, we're a very busy team. You know, over this summer we've had an incredible spike in the amount of inquiries we've had. So it's very easy to lose sight sometimes of the strategic goal that you're trying to get to, because you're dealing with the day-to-day. But running this iTree project, it was a relatively simple project to do. It didn't involve a huge amount of back office work by us, short of exporting the data and the conversations with yourself. It wasn't a really onerous thing to do. And again, we're talking about benefits. The benefits of having that survey have definitely been worth the time that we had to put into getting the data ready and having those discussions with you.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it, Rob. Yeah. And that's great that you've got more plans for the future as well.
Yeah.
I think we're going to wrap it up there for our chat, if that's okay with you. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to mention quickly before we go.
No, I think we've got it pretty much covered there.
Great. Yeah, thanks ever so much though for explaining all the work you've been doing. And I think Josh now has got some questions. I'm going to make Josh the presenter, I think. And
No,
then,
no reason to make me a presenter. Maybe
fab. Okay.
Yeah.
So
great job, guys. I think you covered a lot there, and we got some good questions here. We got a couple, and actually, Kenton, while I'm asking this one, maybe you can pull your slide back up. I think if you go back to one of the slides, this might help answer, because there's quite a few questions around the idea of the carbon. So let me. Can you pull yours? Yeah, can you pull your slide deck back up, Kenton?
Yep.
There you go. Perfect. Leave it on that one. You had it there. Oh, you went away. I wanted to show the. Yeah.
Is that
better?
There
you go. That's perfect. Yeah. So we had a question about like the average number, how much the average tree captures carbon, and also around the soil and grass levels, maybe canceling out emissions from grass management. So, I think it would be good, Rob, you mentioned the fleet vehicles. Did you guys look at anything around grass management at all?
No, we didn't actually. And yeah, that was something which would have been interesting to look at. We were really lucky because our fleet manager, who manages the repairs fleet, is very on the ball, and he had all those figures for how much the carbon emissions for our vehicle fleet were, and he could drill down into that and get me the annual outputs. I don't think the grounds maintenance contractors were quite at that level of sophistication that they could give us those numbers, but it would certainly be really interesting to look into.
And then, okay, great. And then, Kenton, I was thinking maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the other iTree reports that come out, because there was a question around, the average, and I was thinking that, I know with an iTree you can pull out like by some of the species level, by some of the size category. Maybe you could have a little more discussion around some of the other reports or outputs that iTree also puts out.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is generally the headline figures, and for each tree in Rob's tree inventory, iTree was able to give a good estimate of the carbon stored for that particular tree. So when we think about the whole of the Live West estate, the average tree, reverse engineering it from these figures wouldn't really be appropriate, but iTree will allow you to run the model on a single tree or a large tree inventory of 20, 40,000 trees or whatever. So I know that doesn't specifically answer the question about what the average tree stores in carbon, but iTree can do that.
Well, I think it's an important point that you can drill into iTree and look at individual trees. You can look at all of a species of a tree. You know, you can look at an area if you want to break it into certain quadrants and rerun iTree, you know. So it doesn't just spit out a total, I guess is what I wanted people to know about.
Yeah, that's an important point. Yeah.
And so Rob, there was a good question here on, you know, we talked a lot about maintenance of the trees. Curious about the planting of the trees. Do you have planting goals? And if so, what are they? How many trees are you planting a year or something, or anything around targets around that?
Yeah, we don't currently have a planting target. It's been quite piecemeal, the amount of planting that we do, and that's really been influenced by time constraints, really. When we've been really busy dealing with inquiries, we haven't had as much time to draw up planting schemes for the coming season. So it has been, you know, rather hit and miss, and that's one thing which I'm, you know, looking to develop is an actual, you know, a commitment to a certain amount of planting every year, and then making sure that we put aside the time in order to get that in the ground. So we don't have a specific planting target at the moment. I think we have a policy commitment to replace trees which we remove where possible, even if it's not in the same immediate site. But at the moment, I would think we're probably some way from achieving even that number. So it is something that we do need to look at increasing. Having said that, when we're developing new sites, that's probably where a large part of our tree planting takes place at the moment. Where we're putting new sites in, there's planning requirements for new tree planting. So we probably do plant significant numbers of trees as part of that development process. The challenge then is to make sure that they're planted correctly, and then we know where they are so that we can take on the maintenance of them from the time they go in the ground.
Okay, great. Here's a two-part question, Rob. You mentioned back at the beginning about moving from reactive to cycle prune, and was wondering how that affected your budget, and how did you communicate this, and also maybe talking also with you know, there was a question also about like the importance of community engagement, or the importance of communicating with the homeowners, you know. So wondering how you worked through that process.
Okay. Yeah, from the budget point of view, I think, you know, if if you go looking for trouble, you'll always find it. So we were aware when we started that we were going to have to set aside, you know, an amount of money to cover the sort of immediate hazard abatement, if you like. But actually, we found that because we were, you know, proactively going to look at things, we could schedule those works in. We were having to do a lot less, you know, emergency call outs, or sending people out, you know, hither and thither to have a look at things. So there was an initial, you know, spike in the amount of money we were spending, but then I think it leveled off very quickly. And also it reduced the amount of inquiries we were taking, because people had seen a surveyor knocking on doors, looking at the trees. That in itself reassured people that we were taking this seriously, and we were looking for hazards and trees that, you know, could potentially cause harm. So it reassured the residents that we were, you know, out there with their interest in heart, looking for these issues, which I suppose feeds into the community engagement question. Yes, so we have, whenever we carry out significant tree work, we always try to notify, you know, as many people who will be immediately affected by that, so that it doesn't come as a surprise when the contractors turn up and start carrying out that work. And we try and give as much time as possible so people can get in touch with us and we can explain the reasons for, you know, the work that we're carrying out. But we've also, with the planting, tried to involve local groups within the planting of the trees. So last year we had a few estates where we were planting, and although the actual planting was being carried out by the contractors, we got the residents to come out and and get involved with that, and come out and have that discussion with us. Because if the residents are taking ownership of the planting and getting involved with that, it's a lot more likely that those trees will survive to maturity. I think there's a lot of research that shows that, if you get people that live nearby involved in those schemes, there should be a much higher retention to maturity of those trees. So yeah, it's something, and we're quite lucky because we have our own community development team, and they're looking at, as part of our Greener Futures Together program, getting involved when they can again with local communities to promote planting and other sort of biodiversity projects. So yeah, we'd really like to get more involved with that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thanks a lot. Well, guys, that's we're right up on the hour here, so I want to respect everybody's time. Appreciate the discussion today. I thought it was really rich, and got a couple of comments here that said, it's great to hear about the asset management, and everybody's getting a lot of inquiries right now while people are home, locked down, and
yes.
Nice and precise and to the point. So, thanks a lot, Rob. Thanks for all the effort there, and Live West, and Kenton, thanks for sharing some of the knowledge around iTree. And yeah, again, that's a free software that people can use. And so I know we got Nadine has sent out a couple links to some social media accounts here and the chat feature, so you guys can follow that if you want, and I know we have some other webinars in the future, so that's where we'll be promoting those if you have found value in this. Just a reminder that you will be getting an email with a follow-up survey as well as a link to this recording. So thanks again, everybody. Hope you stay safe and keep up the good work. So have a good day.
Thank you.